very dramatically. Our speakers today will be discussing the various programs, classes, and activities they offer to seniors that can help to battle depression. So tonight we have three speakers. Audrey Goldsmith is from Horizons Mental Health Center, one of our healthcare entities. Courtney Clinton from Hutchinson Recreation Commission, and Becky Warner from the DeLoss B. Smith Senior Center. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All right. Does anybody recognize this title? I gave it about the beginning of the month at the Senior Center. Any lucky people? Get to hear it twice? I see some familiar faces. Well, hopefully you'll just be able to maybe pick up on a couple of things you didn't pick up on at the beginning of the month, and for the rest of you, this will all be some new information. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what depression is. That way you guys can feel like you can see it in yourselves or in family members or loved ones that you have in your life, so that maybe you can be a support for them and help them as well as yourselves. So that's one of the reasons why this training is going to be important. So you can help identify what depression looks like with people in your life. You can understand how it works a little bit, but ultimately the goal today is to really understand what we do about depression and what we do to help ourselves cope with it if we are suffering with it ourselves or our loved ones are. It can help you talk to your family about it. It can help you talk to your doctor. If you can realize what's going on in your body and in your mind, it's going to be a lot more easier to go to your doctor and explain the symptoms that you're having so that they can accurately help you and diagnose you and treat you. All right. So what is mental illness? If you think about it, as we all age, and even in our young teens and our childhood, everybody has a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of depression. There we go. Is that better? All right. So what happens when it actually converts itself to being a mental illness? We all have a little bit of depression, a little bit of anxiety. We can learn to cope with it by being around our families, having good social supports. But when does it actually become an impairment in our life? So when we look at a mental illness, what we talk about is having a significant distress and an inability to start coping with some of the things that we experience. So maybe our sadness gets so intense that we just can't function in our daily lives and do the things that we're used to doing every day. Being a husband, being a wife, being a friend, being a mother or father. But we also want to look at things that happen in our life that might just increase depression or increase anxiety, like a loss, or maybe a change in job, or a loss in job, or moving states. Those things can also be similar, but when we're talking about what a mental illness is, it starts having a very big impact to where we can't do a lot of our daily functions anymore. It can cause frequent stress, make us feel really miserable. It can affect our ability to function and really reduce our ability to cope with the feelings that we're having. And it can make it very difficult to handle our own responsibilities. There's a lot of different treatments for the disorders that we have in our mental health field. And some people can actually manage their own mental health, their own depression and anxiety on their own by family supports, or exercise, or meditation, or religion. A lot of people turn to therapy or medication to help with their mental disorders as well. This is just a little graph of different mental health diagnoses that we as clinicians deal with on a regular basis. But I want to break things down a little bit more simpler. So mental health can be a clear confusion, problems thinking, problems coping. It can be excessive fears, excessive worries, a lot of aggression and anger. We see that often. It can be suicidal thinking, changes in our mood. We're either very, very elated and happy, or we can be very, very sad and down. We can withdraw from friends and family. We can be excessively tired and fatigued and not have motivation to want to do the things that we used to do, that we used to find pleasure in. And we can also experience some guilt and frustration and just get really down and negative on ourselves. So specifically today I was asked to come and talk a little bit about depression and a little bit about the treatments that are offered, and specifically things that are offered at Horizons. So when we look at depression, it's going to be a sad mood that's observed by other people. We're not going to want to do the activities that we normally think are fun. We're not going to want to be social with our friends or our family. You're going to feel really fatigued, have a loss of energy that you just can't explain. You're going to have an irregular sleep pattern. You can either be sleeping way too much or not be sleeping at all. Feel really worthless, kind of have this guilt that comes from nowhere. There's no explanation. It can also be a large lack of concentration. You might not be able to sit and do your crosswords or watch Wheel of Fortune or do any of the things that you used to be able to really concentrate on. And sometimes a severe depression left untreated can also lead to suicidal ideation and thoughts of death. I always like to take the opportunity to talk about the difference between grief and depression. As we get older, you start to lose loved ones, and you start to lose those in your life, and some people can get those two types of things confused, grief versus depression. So when we look at grief, we're looking at this feeling of emptiness and this feeling of loss. It's a dysphoria that we can have. We just don't have a satisfaction with life anymore. This can come in waves. Sometimes we can feel that life satisfaction. We can start to feel a little bit of that happiness again. And then we might have something that reminds us of the person that we lost or what we're dealing with, and then that kind of increases that feeling of guilt and that dysphoria and being discontent with your life. When we look at grief, the thing that kind of helps separate it is that you keep your self-esteem and your own kind of self-perception intact, right? You're grieving the loss of your life, the person, the loved one, not necessarily an inner grief always, where you start to lose your own self-esteem, okay? So when we start to look at depression, this is going to be a really depressed mood. You can see my typo if there's any old English teachers in here. You're welcome. We have an inability to anticipate happiness or pleasure. It can kind of be this constant sadness and feeling really down. There's not any specific triggers. Nothing might happen that might make us sad or feel down on ourselves. We might not have lost a loved one or lost a job or got a divorce or any of these other triggering events. And we just feel worthless and hopeless, and it's really hard for us to experience happiness the way that we used to experience happiness as a person. I like to bring in anxiety as well, because these two things kind of go hand in hand at times. Sometimes when we see clients over at Horizons, they usually talk about both things. They feel stressed, they feel very worried, they feel jittery, they feel panicked, they feel very overwhelmed. And those things can happen if we have a lot of depression going on, especially when we don't have the coping skills that we need to combat the depression that we're experiencing. So it's always good to be aware that these are other things that you can experience when you do experience depression. So feeling easily fatigued, it's similar in having that lack of concentration and feeling like you can't focus. Irritability can also be similar with depression, especially in males. There's usually a little bit more anger and irritability with men. With anxiety, we always feel like our bodies are so tight because we hold ourselves different. We're anxious, we're nervous, and our muscles just get real tense, and then you might get home and sit on your couch and relax, and you realize your arms just hurt or your legs hurt because maybe you've just been balled up all day long. And it can also have a lot of effect on your sleep. So, all right. So what causes depression? What causes anxiety? When we look neurologically, when we look at our brain mechanisms, our neurons and our synapses in our brains help with our mitochondria, and they shoot our neurotransmitters and all this fun neuroscience stuff. But when we start to experience depression, they don't perform like they normally do or like they have in the past for you. You start to get maybe too much of one or too less of another. And that's where the medication can come in and help stabilize that. That's where diet can come in. And exercise is a great way to naturally help rebalance some of those chemicals in your brain. Thinking more positively, believe it or not, can also help start to rebalance some of those neurotransmitters in your brain. Other things you can do are therapy, group therapy. Those are a couple different medications up there I have for antidepressants or things that might help also with anxiety. A lot of people aren't always comfortable putting medication into their bodies, or they might not really believe in therapy, which is okay. Other things work too: meditation, family support, social support, your religion, faith, spirituality. When we go into really, really intensive depression, we start to talk about electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, where they actually go in and put, electroshock waves through your brain to help stimulate some of these different neurons, and that's for really, really, really chronic depressive patients. So another reason that this is important to talk to you guys about today, there was a survey done on elderly women that showed their perceived lack of emotional support in their life was actually a predictor to a higher mortality rate. And the more emotional support and structural aspects of support that you have in your life actually can help reduce mortality. So being aware, knowing signs and symptoms, but also the good thing is knowing things that can help combat the depression. I like to also be the Debbie Downer of the group and talk about suicide while I have everybody's eyes and ears in front of me, because it's a very important topic. It's very important for all ages, and we'll see that in a minute. But to be aware, it's a very growing epidemic in our population, with those people within your age group all the way down to 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. So it affects everybody. So I want to take a brief second to talk about this, and then we'll lighten it back up again with these two ladies behind me talking about all the fun stuff in the community. So what is suicide? These are a couple definitions. What is suicidal ideation? And what is suicidal intent? So when we, as clinicians over at Horizon, I work in the crisis department over there, and so we really pay attention to suicidal thoughts versus somebody actually wanting to do something to harm and kill themselves. So just because you're battling with some of those reoccurring thoughts of death or suicidal thoughts, those aren't things that can't be helped and can't be treated. So it's really important to try to involve somebody in your life and let them know what's going on. Or we might have loved ones in our lives. Like I said, kids, maybe grandkids, great-grandkids are struggling with some of this. And so it can be insightful to understand a little bit of it so that you might be able to help them as well. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. I think it's especially important to highlight in research done, it's a little old, but in 2014, There was a highest rate among 85 plus. So that's very important to highlight. And then the second highest rate was between the ages of 45 and 64. Men often die 3 times more often than women because they use more lethal means of suicide. And 7 out of 10 of those who complete suicide are actually white males. So it should hit home and resonate with you just a little bit, but just being insightful and knowing that this goes on in our community is very important. So why do people resort? Maybe they don't have the coping skills, maybe they don't have the support, they don't have the family structure. When the depression and the sadness and the guilt gets so deep, just think of it like quicksand. Any move you make makes you sink a little bit deeper. Anything you try to do, if you talk, if you breathe, it makes you sink a little bit deeper. And sometimes people just can't get out of that mind frame to get the help and support and the treatment that they need to deal with some of these thoughts and symptoms that they're going through. They don't see an end. And so death appears to be the only solution. And you can imagine feeling like that. And I could probably agree that sometimes you might start to just feeling ambivalent about death. Anything you do makes it worse. Everything you talk about or think or say is negative and bad. So that's it's not necessarily, I don't want to say an excuse, but these are how some people start to think and their mind processes when they start contemplating suicide. So that's important to remember. Warnings, talking a lot about suicide. You might have friends that start to give a lot of their possessions away, or they might start canceling going to bingo, or going to the community center with you, or coming to things like this that are out socially in the community. They might have a big shift in their mood. Maybe they always used to be this really happy, energetic person, and they just stop. They're not energetic anymore. They don't say a lot of positive things. They're a very negative person, and that's just not like them. They can often make kind of some vague references to death and dying, or make statements like, oh, I won't be here next week for that, or it won't be a problem much longer, or some simple things like that that we might not really catch on to, that we might look over very easily. Okay, so good protective factors. Life satisfaction, right? Our ability to think and cope and process, coping skills, social supports, therapeutic relationships, social relationships, family relationships, activity, your faith or your religion are always very good factors against suicide. So what do we do? What happens if we see somebody or have somebody in our life or know a friend that we know struggles with this? We take their threats seriously. We pay attention to them. We hold a conversation. It's okay to ask, do you feel suicidal? Are you having thoughts to kill yourself? A lot of times when we ask people that in my work every day that I do, it's a relief. It's a relief when somebody pays attention, and a relief when somebody just asks that question. Okay? We follow very specific directions. Be at my house at 5 p.m. We're going to talk about this. At 6 p.m. we're going to call your mom. At 7 p.m. we're going to go to Horizons. Whatever your directions might be to help that person, it needs to be specific. And you follow those tasks to completion. So being there for that person and being very reliable. You don't want to be very pushy or be judgmental, because that's just going to kind of make them probably be quiet and not really want to say a whole lot. So the things we don't do is ignore. We don't assume. We don't want to be sarcastic or angry. We don't want to make promises that we can't keep. And we don't want to offer solutions or advice. They just want their story to be heard. And after that, we can help them figure out what they want to do from there on out. Something safe, something logical, and something that's going to get them help and treatment. All right, so there was my Debbie Downer speech of this evening. But now the fun part's going to come with the ladies from the Senior Center and the rec to tell you about all these fun things you can do, exercise, social activities, being a part of your community. These are all fantastic things to help combat against depression. So I applaud all of you for coming out and being here tonight and having all your family and your friends and relations around you and supporting your community. So thank you for being here.
So, good evening. My name is Courtney Clennon, and I am with Hutchinson Rec. Just briefly, I program their fitness classes both in the community and at Elmdale, our Senior Plus Center, or 50 Plus Center. And I also teach classes myself, and I'm a personal trainer. So, she kind of gave you the whys, and she kind of briefly touched on exercise as a solution or as a therapy, if you will. And they have asked me to kind of go into that a little bit deeper and talk about why physical activity benefits your mental health. They gave me about 5-ish minutes. I will warn you, as I can see some of my participants out there, they know how much I love this stuff, and I can get long-winded on it, so we'll try to keep it to 5. Physical activity. So before I scare you too much on that, what is physical activity? And in its simplest form, it is just moving. Just moving. It doesn't have to be any hardcore burpees like I make them do. It's simply just moving, and that can be household chores. That can be taking a walk, working in your garden, anything that just gets you up out of the chair and moves you around. And as a general guideline, they say 20 to 30 minutes a day. And while if you're not used to doing anything, 30 minutes may seem like a lot, but it doesn't have to be all at once. You can take it in little 10-minute chunks. Get up out of your chair and go get some chores done, do laundry or whatever, and then take a break. And then go out and weed the garden or the driveway or whatever, and then take a break. So it can be just simply as that. So why take the time to do that, 20 to 30 minutes? Well, it does help with depression, but the why it helps with depression, it just makes you generally feel better. If you've got chronic aches and pains a lot, you're just gonna, if you don't feel well all the time, your mood's not gonna be good. And you're just gonna sink, like she said, the quicksand analogy, you're just gonna sink deeper and deeper. So if you spend some time working on that body, making it a little bit stronger, you will feel better, and it will help your mood. But specifically for depression, and with that one, the studies show that group exercise, because it not only adds in then that social piece, working out with others, moving with others, that social piece, so group exercise, the studies show it can decrease depression upwards from 30% on, 30% or greater, which is pretty significant. It can also prevent or reduce dementia. So very important to keep moving, keep the blood and the oxygen flowing to that brain, can help with dementia. If you know somebody or you are somebody that already has some issues with dementia or Alzheimer's, they highly recommend regular physical activity. It can reduce the symptoms. There's some behavioral and psychological symptoms that come with those diseases, and regular exercise has been proven to reduce those symptoms and sometimes eliminate them altogether. It boosts your memory. Getting that blood flowing to the brain can help boost your memory. And then the last reason I had was it can prolong your independent living, which just makes sense. You get to feeling better, you're a little bit stronger, which helps trickle into just your active daily living. Just walking up and down your stairs is easier. Getting in and out of the bathtub, all those things are easier, so it prolongs your independent living. And I can go on and on. That's just sort of some of the mental benefits. It decreases your chances of heart disease, diabetes, some cancers. Matter of fact, exercise or physical activity can reduce breast cancer specifically 30 to 40%. I mean, that's a big number. So those things are important. And also arthritis. I know a lot of people with arthritis think that it's too painful to exercise, but it's actually just the opposite. If you can kind of get those joints moving, it can sort of reduce some of those symptoms. And it also can help you maintain your weight, which weight, as you might suspect, would add to some of the arthritis issues. So, real quick, how? I'll give you some ideas on how your mental capacity and how you can really engage that brain when you work out. Combining that brain, that thinking, with body movement. Putting those two together is one of the best things you can do for your brain. I know for a while there were some crazes on apps. Download this app and do this brain exercises. It was real big on brain exercise apps and crossword puzzles and Sudokus. And those things are all great. You can continue to do those and feel good about it. Those are good. But from most of the things I've read, doing lots of crossword puzzles will make you better at crossword puzzles. But doing things that work your brain and then put movement with it really help really exercise that brain. So brain exercises like Tai Chi is a great one. You have to, the way they coach you on Tai Chi, you're constantly thinking about that posture. You're holding that chest up nice and tight. And then you're coordinating your movements with breath. And so you're inhaling and you're shifting your weight to one foot. You're exhaling, you're thinking about stepping forward with another foot. So it's putting that brain thinking with movement. Then you can take it a step further and you can work left side, right side brain, make them cross. And some of my people will tell them, I make them do this. So we do balance, can you still hear me? We do balance exercises. So I've got one arm out, one leg out, and I bring them across my midline. If you think about cutting me in half, I'm making them cross my midline. So now I'm thinking with the opposite brain, which forces my brain to just work a little harder, all of that. And last, I wanted to tell you about coordination exercises. And you can look some up online, but again, it makes you use your right brain and left brain at the same time, but differently. And I'll show you one example. And if Betty and Lynn and Linda in the back want to get up and do it with me, that's great. But I make them do this in class. Yeah, I knew they would. So the idea being, this is just an example, and I don't know if you can see me very well, but taking my one arm and I'm going to move it up, I'll move it to the side, I'm going to move it down to the side. And I just repeat that movement, up, side, down, side. I get that, I repeat that about 4 times. You can do it seated, you can do it standing. So I get that pattern down in my head. That's this side. Then I go to this side. This side I'm just going to go up, down, down. Get that. You know what's coming, right? Then you got to put them together. And one brain's got to think, so you got to put them together. So I'm going side, up, side. It takes some practice, and I'm doing it faster. When I started it, it was like about this fast. And then I had to think about where these were going. But it's all part of the process. It's that processing speed, it's just working with that brain. So, did I convince anybody to move? That was my goal. Thank you for letting me speak.
Well, thank you. That's good to have this information. I see a lot of people who are here that we know, and they have gone through quite a number of activities and exercise classes, and so we're going to talk a little bit about what is offered at the DeLoss V. Smith Senior Center and what you might be able to do in terms of other kinds of activities, programs, events, and those that I know who are here. I see a lot of you. If you'd like to intervene and make a comment, feel free to do that. So, but first, I thought you might want to know just a little bit about DeLoss V. Smith, the founder of the Senior Center. And DeLoss was an only child. He grew up here in Hutchinson, and he loved acting. That was one of the things that he pursued. And he was in performing arts. He was also very involved in music and opera, directing, managing radio shows. I think some of you may remember hearing him on some of the local radio stations. And he was also on Broadway and quite a number of special events, and he was also actually at KU, he was in the political science category. But what he actually wanted to do, beginning in the 1980s, created the DeLosby Smith Senior Center. And there are quite a number of activities and exercise classes, just as they were talking about Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, a number of exercises that would be very beneficial if needed. And they are many times subscribed by different physicians locally. And everything that is offered at the DeLosby Smith Senior Center is free. There's no charge for that. And so we also have information about other types of activities that people might be interested in. If it helps in terms of developing friendships and being able to visit with people, there are quite a number of different types of arts and craft classes. And there are also, in addition to that, a variety of card games, and we have birthday luncheons every month to celebrate those individuals who have birthdays. And we have special visits with different people here in the community, physicians and people who have special focuses on aging, what you need to know in terms of if there are certain types of symptoms, or if there's a need for certain types of exercises and that type of thing. So there are quite a number of activities that are available, and we're not under any type of local or state or federal guidance. We're on our own, and there's no charge for any of the activities that are offered. So if your physicians are recommending that you either have some certain type of exercise, or that there may be a recommendation that you're with people and you have the opportunity to visit and spend time and actually participate in different arts and craft classes or exercise classes or card games, and just a very large variety of activities, if that's helpful, especially to be around other people and make friends and enjoy that. And one of the things that DeLos did, this was part of his philosophy also, and DeLos was very, very good friend with Clark Gable and Natalie Wood, Jack Nicholson. Some of these names you probably remember from acting and performing and television, and Susan Strasberg. He also knew Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, and DeLos, as time went on, he decided that this was something he wanted to do here in this community in Hutchinson. And he was a very, very close friend with a number of people here in Hutchinson, and we had the opportunity for him to actually start the senior center. And following that, there is no charge for any of the activities or programs or events, because that's something that DeLos invested and began to invest, and it's continued. And so that's something that's helpful for people. And you do have to be 60 years of age or older. And if that's something that you're interested in, or your physician has recommended in terms of exercise or some other types of activities in arts and crafts, or there's such a variety that's offered. We have a large number of instructors who are there, and people who are always willing to be able to assist you. And if there's a special program that is offered, we have physicians who come in and talk about some of these things, especially with exercising and being available with other people. And if you've not had the opportunity to take a tour of the DeLosby Smith Senior Center, you're welcome to come at any time. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. And you'll also find something that's very enjoyable. DeLoss kept pictures of all of the different actresses and actors who he worked with and who knew, and we have those on display. And in addition to quite a number of booklets and information that talk about DeLoss and what he created here in Hutchinson. This was something, as he was an only child, and after a period of time in his work on Broadway, he ended up in Hollywood, and he was very, very good friends with a number of these people, and he made the decision on his own to return to Hutchinson, where he was born and where he was growing up and going to school. He decided it was his vision to do this because it was something he thought that was needed. And so we want to invite you to feel free to come in and take a tour. And actually, we offer the same types of exercise classes and just being available for other activities and presentations from doctors and presentations from others, so that people have an opportunity to make friends and be together. And all of the people who are here, all my people that I know, if you have any other comments or anything you'd like to say, you're welcome to do that right now. Yes?
Crafts part of the program. You go down and do crafts.
Yes, yes.
Glass, scratch art. That's a big part.
That's true. And in addition to the exercise classes, what he's talking about, all kinds of arts and craft classes. And there's quite a number. And not just painting, but also we have different types of special things that we do with painting. Not just painting, but also there are arts and crafts that have been introduced in terms of painting certain cups, and we've got just a long list of those types of activities also. So if that's something, and you're correct, that's right, that you would like to do, there's no charge for that. And it is always beneficial if you're looking at creating some things before holidays or for special birthdays in the family. And there's no charge for that activity. You may want to purchase some of the items for the special projects that they're working on, but there's no charge for the actual activity.
And, we'll open the floor for questions now for any of the speakers. So if you just want to raise your hand, I'll bring the mic over to you. Does anyone volunteer as tribute?
Line dancing.
Yes, and I know who that is. That's Nancy Marshall. And she teaches line dancing and at the DeLoss V. Smith Senior Center and also at Elmdale. And well, can I go ahead and tell all of the performances that they've had? They actually, especially this time of year with the line dancing class, they actually go to quite a number of locations to perform. And they've also, every year, have been asked to perform at the Kansas State Fair. And then they've been to Salina, and you've been to Oklahoma. We could go on for a long period of time. Nancy, would you like to say anything?
No.
And yes,
You might also mention for the guys, they have a wood carving class, and they play pool over at Elmdale.
yes.
And some of them play pinochle and stuff, so there is some things for the men too.
Did you all hear that? Wood carving?
Hey, men can line dance.
Does anyone else have any other additions or comments? Oh, yes, another one. Now, this really isn't an exercise, but computer classes are also offered. Yes, it helps the brain. And there are beginning and intermediate and advanced classes also. And there's no charge.
You might mention that we have Young at Heart
Yes.
for everybody 55 on up. And it's like a worship service on Thursday mornings.
Yes, every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, we have Young at Heart, and it is a service, a non-denominational church service, and it's for anyone 55 years of age or older.
All right, we'll design
Thanks.
more. We'll wrap it up. Please be sure to join us June 19th to talk about pain management and opioids. And we have some cookies in the back. If you want to grab one, please feel free. Thank you.